Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. Today is our group learning program where we're going to be starting with meditation to be able to help train your mind. But then we're going to move into a talk on chapter 18 from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Chapter 18 is titled God's Creative Action. You have free will. This is where you learn about this being of God, of how you can either get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. Sometimes people think that the Buddha rejected God or denied the existence of God. Sometimes you'll hear this from different people. And this is just a misunderstanding that these individuals haven't actually penetrated into the teachings of the Buddha very closely to be able to see that the Buddha actually did teach about this being. It's just that the Buddha didn't make this being the center or the focal point of his teachings, because it's not this being that determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's you that determines that. So the Buddha essentially put you at the center of his teachings. So you could actually have a relationship with this being and get to enlightenment, or you could choose to not have a relationship with this being and still get to enlightenment. And I'm going to explain to you guys those two different scenarios of how you would be able to do that. Because depending on what you've learned in your life, you might have learned things like to fear God, or that God punishes you or rewards you, or that God has some plan or destiny for you. And you're going to learn about these kinds of things and understand that these things aren't actually true. So welcome to our class today, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. And at the same time, I'd like to invite you to join for meditation. We're going to start with some chanting in order to ease the mind into meditation. Then afterwards, I'm going to share some guidance to be able to help you during the meditation. Then there's going to be a period of time where we're just meditating together. Then there's going to be a period of time where we come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where we'll start today's class. So welcome to everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. And if you'd like to join for meditation, take whatever position is comfortable for you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Wat Tung Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusranang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Wat Tung Bhagavanhang Aphivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys here at the temple. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. This is our group learning program where each Sunday and Wednesday I come together with students helping them to understand the path to enlightenment. We get together here at the temple at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. on Sundays. And then on Wednesdays, we do this at 9 a.m. at the temple. And then at 9 p.m., I do this from home from our home studio. And I live stream this so that no matter where you are in the world, you can be learning and growing and developing on the path. What I do each Sunday as I go chapter by chapter in this book is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, where I help students to gradually understand the foundational teachings that it takes to help you move to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. You'll no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this is eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. And that's what the Buddha focused students on, is to be able to train their mind and uproot the causes and conditions that are producing these discontent feelings to be able to occur. You're eliminating certain pollutions out of the mind. This is coming through training of the mind. And as you're doing that, you'll notice that the mind's focused, you'll have concentration, clarity, deep memory. These are all qualities that you start to experience more and more coming into your mind as you train your mind. You'll notice that your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming, that you're not bitter and harsh and hostile anymore in your relationships. And you'll notice that they'll become very harmonious throughout all your relationships in your life. You'll get to a point where you're not even in a bad mood anymore. It's physically impossible for you to experience that. So that's what the Buddha focused his students on, is actually training the mind and being able to get to this enlightenment mental state, where there's these qualities and others as well. And I help students to be able to learn that all throughout the various programs and courses and retreats that I share. But here in chapter 18, this chapter is titled God's Creative Actions, You Have Free Will. This is helping you to understand about this being of God. Because what the Buddha did is he actually taught you the natural laws of existence, of how to train your mind to get to this peace and joy. But it's not based in God. Sometimes people think that the Buddha rejected God or denied the existence of God. You'll hear people say this from time to time, but this is a misunderstanding. Those people haven't really penetrated into the original teachings of the Buddha deep enough to be able to see that he actually taught about this being. But he didn't put this being at the center of his teachings, because it's not this being that determines whether or not you get to enlightenment or not. It's you that determines whether or not you get to enlightenment. So he put you at the center of his teaching so you can learn and grow and develop. But he did teach about the world around you. This is part of the path to enlightenment, is to understand the world that you live in. One of the reasons why the mind is experiencing the discontent feelings is because it lacks wisdom about how your mind functions in the world around you. Essentially, when the mind is experiencing stress or anxiety, there's a certain lack of wisdom that the mind has about the world, and it's struggling and having difficulties. Just like we did when we were children, we lacked wisdom of the natural law of gravity, so we struggled and had difficulties. We made unwise decisions. It led to unwholesome results for us, where we fell down and we bumped our elbows and we broke our toys and we hit our head and we cried and cried and cried because we lived in a world that we didn't understand. But slowly but surely, we gained wisdom of this natural law, and we could see the truth for ourselves that this is actually a true, real natural law. We don't believe in the natural law of gravity. We can actually see it for ourselves. It's right there, right? So none of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, including the topic that I'm going to be teaching tonight about God. The things that I'm going to teach you, you'll be able to independently verify. The Buddha didn't try to prove or disprove whether God exists. He's not trying to convince anybody of any particular thing. He trained his mind to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state, and then he helped other people to be able to experience that too, by helping them to understand what did he do to be able to experience that mental state. And if people would like to learn that, great, they're welcome to learn that. But if not, then that's their choice too. So I'm going to share with you guys this topic of God's creative action. You have free will, so that if you're interested in getting to enlightenment with the relationship with this being, you can do that. And if you're not interested in having a relationship with this being, you can actually still get to enlightenment that way too. But there's certain things that you need to learn about this being if you're going to be able to either have a relationship with this being or not, because oftentimes people have been taught that this being controls you, or it punishes you or rewards you, or that you should fear this being, or that you should worship this being. These are different things that people have been taught, and oftentimes we're misunderstanding true reality of what's really occurring in the world. That's what the unenlightened mind has. So I'm going to share with you guys some teachings that are going to help you to understand this being. And I'm going to pause a few times and see if anybody has questions here at the temple, or anyone joining online. You guys can ask any and all questions that you like. If you'd like to ask questions here at the temple, we have microphones here in the center of the room. If you could just get a microphone and take it to your seat. If you press the gray button, you're going to see the lights come on, and you can hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then if you'd like to keep these mics with you, you're more than welcome to, because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share it with them. And then if you're not using it, if you could turn it off, that'll help to make sure that we don't get any feedback through the speakers. And then for anybody who's online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So let me just switch over to some visual aids here so everybody online can see what it is that I'm teaching, and you guys here can see as well. Okay, everybody should be able to see the visual aids here. All right, so this topic of God's creative activity, this understanding that you have free will, I'm going to start by just helping you understand a definition of God. Your definition of God may or may not match to this. Again, I'm not here to convince you of anything, but at least when I say the word God, you'll understand what I'm speaking about, and then you'll have a kind of common understanding. But whether you think of God in the same way as me or not, that's a choice for you to make. It's not up to me to convince you of that. But this is how I think about God. As I think about God as the creator of the universe and the source of all moral authority. authority, the supreme being. And in English, we refer to this being as God, but there's other traditions that might refer to this being as Allah, or some people refer to this being as the all-knowing or all-powerful, which is omniscient or omnipotent. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, he referred to this being as Brahma. You'll see him refer to it in that way, that if you read his teachings, he will refer to God as Brahma. And the Buddha, during his lifetime, they actually had different thoughts about many different gods. So the Buddha actually taught about many different gods. But when he talked about the God that we're describing here, he referred to this being as the great Brahma, the supreme being, the all-knowing, all-powerful, the creator of the universe. When I talk about this being of God, you might hear me use the pronoun he from time to time, because all of my interaction with this being, I consider to be of a male gender, but anybody could refer to this being with any gender whatsoever. If you think about this being as a female, great, that's your choice. If you think about this being as having no gender at all, that's fine too. The Buddha during his lifetime did mention in his teachings that he considered this being to be of a male gender as well. But whether you consider this being to be that way or not is up to you. But at least you'll know that when you hear me refer to this being maybe occasionally as a he, you'll understand why, is because I think of this being as a male gender. And when I say that this being is the source of all moral authority, what people tend to ask is, well, what is that? Well, as part of the natural laws that the Buddha taught that you're awakening to, is he's teaching you about moral conduct. There's certain moral conduct that an unenlightened being is functioning through that is causing harm to others. And as long as you're causing harm through your moral conduct, this harm is going to come back to you. So the teachings of the Buddha are all about training your mind, but there is a part of it that is about improving your moral conduct. It's not rules or commandments. He's not trying to guilt, shame, or fear you into doing anything. Again, it's your life. It's your decisions. Whatever you choose to do, it's up to you to make those decisions. But as long as you're putting out harmful moral conduct, this harm is coming back to you. This is the natural law of Gotama, which you'll hear me talk about in our talk today. So this being of God is the one who has understood this natural laws and created these natural laws. And what we're doing on the path to enlightenment is understanding those natural laws, cultivating wisdom about them, and then choosing for ourselves whether or not we would actually like to practice those. But as you're practicing these natural laws, that's where you're going to see more and more of your condition of your mind improving and the condition of your life improving. So that's what I mean by moral conduct or virtuous behavior. It's important to understand that we all have free will. Sometimes people think that this being controls us or forces us to do one thing or another. And this isn't actually true. And you can independently verify this for yourself by asking these types of questions of yourself. Ask yourself, who chose where you're sitting right now? Who chose what clothes you're wearing? Who chose your hairstyle? Who chose whether or not you ate dinner or breakfast? Who chose where you live? Who chose the job or occupation that you have? Who chose the friends or family members that you spend time with? Who chose whether or not you have a life partner or not? Right? These are all choices that we make as individuals. We have free will to make whatever decision we would like to make, but then we experience the consequences of those decisions. And when we tend to lack wisdom about these natural laws, when we make decisions about our moral conduct, if you lack a wisdom of that natural laws, you'll tend to make unwise decisions, and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you in one way or another. And it's not this being that's choosing that for you. It's your choices that are leading to that. So God doesn't grant enlightenment. It's a practitioner's own decisions through their own wholesome choices to learn and grow and develop on the path that actually leads to this enlightened mental state. So this is a definition of God. Now, in terms of Gotama Buddha's teachings and what he shared, it's important to know that he didn't deny the existence of God and he didn't reject this being. This is what you'll hear some people saying. And this is for someone who just hasn't penetrated into his original teachings, because you can see where he taught about this being. He actually discusses multiple gods during his lifetime because there was multiple beliefs in different gods. But again, he didn't put God at the center of his teachings because it's not God that determines what you experience on a day-to-day basis. He was guiding people to a better way of life, and that better way of life is based on your decisions, not God's decisions. So the Buddha's objective wasn't to prove or disprove God's existence. It was to be able to share the teachings that it leads to liberation of the mind or freedom of the mind, so you can get to that peaceful and joyful mental state. And as you're training your mind to do that, that, you'll be able to see that that's the case. Because there are certain situations where you usually get angry and frustrated and irritated and annoyed. And when you're in those same situations and your mind isn't experiencing that, you'll know it's these teachings that are actually doing that for you. That the Buddha's teachings are to guide you to training your mind so that you can eliminate those discontent feelings. Oftentimes people think these discontent feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others is coming from something external. You might think that it's somebody else that's causing you to be angry or frustrated or annoyed. Maybe you think your mom and dad are making you angry, or your brothers and sisters are irritating you, or your boss is annoying you. This isn't actually true. It's your own mind that's causing these feelings. This is why you can actually eliminate them. But you need to be able to have the wisdom of how to do that. And that's what a Buddha does, is they figure out by themselves, without the help of any teachers or any guides, how to actually uproot the causes and conditions that are producing these feelings, so that then once they train their own mind to be able to experience that, then they can help others to be able to understand that as well. So the Buddha's teachings wasn't about proving or disproving God's existence. It was about helping you to have this independently verifiable truth, to acquire wisdom of these natural laws, to then be able to learn, grow, and develop on this path to now be able to awaken to enlightenment. When we say awakening, what we mean is cultivating wisdom. That if you think about the analogy of someone being asleep, then this individual isn't unaware of the natural laws, that you're going through life sleeping, being unaware of these natural laws. And now you're going to stumble and have missteps and make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. But when you're awake, you have wisdom of these natural laws, and now you're consciously making decisions through these natural laws. And that's where your life and the condition of your mind is becoming more and more peaceful and more joyful. But when you lack wisdom of these natural laws, which most people do, then they're going to go out into the world and make unwise decisions, either inadvertently or overtly, and now you're going to maybe potentially blame other people for the things that you're experiencing. That's what the unenlightened mind typically does, is that when you experience unwholesome results, it will usually say that that's either good luck or bad luck. Or maybe someone might say this is their destiny or their fate, or they might blame it on God or some entity called the universe, or they might blame it on other people, thinking that it's other people that are causing them to experience any one particular thing or another. But the Buddha helps you to have this wisdom to be able to see how it's your own decisions that are leading to any particular result that you're experiencing in your day-to-day life. And when you cultivate wisdom of these natural laws, now you can awaken to them, and now you can make wiser decisions that are leading to more and more wholesome results in your day-to-day life. So the Buddha focused people on training their mind and developing what's called right view and understanding the natural law of karma. Now, I'll explain to you guys what these things are. What right view is where you understand the right view of what's truly causing the feelings in your own mind. That, as I mentioned, the unenlightened mind will tend to go around with a lack of wisdom of what's truly causing the feelings inside your own mind. People will tend to blame others for the feelings that you're experiencing, something external. And what is really causing these feelings is your own craving, desire, attachment, the mind longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, craving permanence. And if the mind gets what it wants, it experiences pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it experiences painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So the mind can only be happy in the unenlightened state when it's getting what it wants or what it expects. And therefore, it can't have permanent peace and permanent joy, because you live in an impermanent world, and you will never be in a situation where you're always getting what you want or what you expect. So it's in the unenlightened state, your ability to be happy actually shrinks, because the mind has all these wants and expectations. And it's only when those things are fulfilled that the mind is experiencing pleasant feelings. But when the mind's not getting what it wants, then it experiences the painful feelings. So the Buddha teaches you that it's your own cravings, desires, attachments, craving permanence that is causing these feelings. And you can see this to be true because you can't believe any of the teachings. You can't believe believe the Buddha. You can't believe me. You can't believe the books. You have to be able to cultivate this wisdom to be able to see the truth for yourself. So you take something like this that a teacher is sharing with you, and you look at your own life and you try to reflect to see if this is actually true or not. You can look at examples from your own life where you've been angry and frustrated and irritated and annoyed. And you can look at that with these fresh eyes, and you can ask yourself, what did your mind want? What were you longing, yearning for? Because if you would have got what you wanted, you would have been happy. But because you didn't get what you wanted, your mind was angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. The mind was craving permanence. I give examples sometimes to help people see this. If you guys would like some examples, I can help you with that. But you need to be able to see it in your own life and be able to see the truth that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Because as long as you think it's other people that are causing this, you'll never actually be able to eliminate it. You'll go around life angry and frustrated and sad your entire life. And that's not the way that you would like to live life. You would like to have peace and joy and happiness, which is a permanent mental state that you can experience in this life. So right view would be to understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, where wrong view would be to be blaming other people. If you're blaming other people for what you experience, you'll never actually solve this. And because the unenlightened mind falsely attributes their painful feelings to something external, the mind will tend to be unskillful. It'll tend to push people away, or it'll push the situation away, or it'll be bitter and harsh and hostile with your intention, speech, and actions. Or an individual will put its expectations on someone and try to control them and force them to do things their way. So as long as the mind's doing this, it can't experience permanent peace and joy, and they can't experience harmonious relationships, because the mind will push people away or be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or put its expectations on someone. And you can look at your life and you can see where these things have occurred. You haven't actually solved the real problem, that the mind is still becoming angry or irritated or frustrated or annoyed. So there's a better way of life, and that's what the Buddha taught. In this natural law of karma is what the Buddha is helping you to be able to awaken to and cultivate wisdom about. This is the cause and effect, or the action and result, the results of your decisions. There's nothing mystical or magical with this natural law. It's not punishments and rewards. It's literally the results of your decisions. As you make decisions either wisely or unwisely, it will produce either wholesome results for you, or wholesome karma, or unwholesome results, or unwholesome karma. Now, some people refer to this as karma. You might have heard that word. That's from the Sanskrit language, where the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So we use the word karma. That's the Pali word. But it's pointing to the same natural law. If this translated to just one English word, I would use it because it'd be easier for everyone, but it doesn't. It's cause and effect, or action and result. It's essentially a sequence of events that's leading to a certain result. When you make decisions either wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience either wholesome or unwholesome results, or unwholesome or wholesome karma. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to awaken to this, so that you can now see the causes in the decisions that you're making that's leading to any unwholesome result that you're experiencing. Because this is actually very empowering. If you continue to think that it's good luck or bad luck that's leading to any decision, that any result that you're experiencing, or that it's destiny or fate, or that it's God or some entity called the universe, or that it's other people that are causing you to experience this, that means you're stuck. Because you can't change any of those things. You can't change good luck or bad luck. You can't change destiny or fate. You can't change God or some entity called the universe. And you can't change other people to do things your way. But when you understand that whatever you're experiencing in life is based on your own decisions, if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that is occurring in your day-to-day life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. But if we blame these other things, then there's never the cultivation of wisdom, so there's never the improvement of decisions, and you tend to keep experiencing the same things over and over and over and over again. So it's not God that's causing the things that we experience, it's our own decisions. And we all have free will, and based on our decisions, we will experience certain results. So understanding the Buddha's teachings about this free will, I've got some of the words of the Buddha here to be able to help you see where he's talking about this. So I'll read this to you and help you to be able to understand it. It's pretty clear, it's pretty straightforward, but there's a few things in here that you need to have some other knowledge about. Like, for example, an ascetic is someone who's given up worldly life and has gone off into a life of homelessness to be able to try to train their mind to get to enlightenment. You don't need to do that in order to be able to get to enlightenment. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, that was very popular, that people would leave the household life, because 2,500 years ago, it was very challenging to live in the household life. You know, just to get water in your house, it was like 3 or 4 or 5 hours, maybe 2 or 3 times a day to carry buckets of water from the well to your house. Right? This was like an all-day affair almost in some cases, depending on how far away you lived from the water source. Nowadays, we just walk over to a spigot and we turn the water and boom, we've got the water, right? Just making clothes and having the ability to wear clothing, it was a really, big feat to be able to just create clothing 2,500 years ago or acquire food. So household practitioners were very busy with just day-to-day life and sustaining their life, where today we have a lot of extra time in our life to be able to do things like learning and growing and developing. So we don't actually need to leave the household life in order to get to enlightenment. During the lifetime of the Buddha, ordained practitioners got to enlightenment, but also household practitioners did as well. But it was just more rare because they were so active with just sustaining their life. So that's what a ascetic is. A Brahmin, we would probably refer to this person as a Hindu priest now, that this is an individual who's born into a certain family and that's doing rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship in order to be able to, create some kind of benefit. And this isn't what the Buddha taught, but this is, what was going on at the time. So this is titled, All is Caused by God's Creative Action. The Buddha says, "Then, monks, I approach those ascetics and Brahmin who hold such a doctrine in view as this: whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. And I said to them, is it true that you venerable ones hold such a doctrine in view? When I ask them this, they affirm it. Then I say to them, in such a case, is it due to God's creative activity that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehood, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view?" So I'm going to pause here for a second. The Buddha, you might think that he's the only one teaching during his lifetime, right? Because if a Buddha existed during your lifetime, you'd probably be interested in learning from that person. But not everybody knew that he was a Buddha during his lifetime, because a Buddha doesn't go around performing a bunch of miracles in order to try to convince people of who they are. Instead, they just share their teachings, and their teachings are independently verifiable, so people can verify that their teachings are true. So there were other people who were teaching besides the Buddha. It wasn't just him. So he would sometimes come in contact with ascetics and Brahmins who were learning from other people. And when he did, he's saying, hey, I asked these people, is it true that you think that whatever you experience, pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, that is all caused by God? And these people said, yes. They said they affirmed it, right? And then the Buddha says, okay, well, essentially, if it's God that is causing you to experience all of these things, is it also God that causes you to kill, to steal, to have sexual activity, to speak falsehoods, to have argumentative speech, to speak harshly, to indulge in this idle chatter, and then being full of longing? This is the craving, the desire, the attachment. Have a mind of ill will. This is like hatred and anger and hostility. And hold wrong view, meaning have a lack of wisdom. And of course, it's not because of God that these kinds of things are occurring. It's one's own decisions. It's our own free will that chooses to do these things or not. So he says, those who fall back on God's creative activity as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done or to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. What he's saying is, if you think God is the one who's producing all the calamity in your life, then you're not even making the decision to improve your life and do what should be done and make wise decisions in your day-to-day life, because you think that everything you experience is because of God. So therefore, you're not even growing and learning and developing to make wise decisions or not make wise decisions, because now you're thinking that everything you experience is from God. And then he goes on finally, and he says, since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded. They do not guard themselves, and even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. What he's saying here about muddle-minded is someone who is not enlightened. They will have pollutions in their mind, and their mind will lack concentration. So because the mind is having these pollutions and it's not even seeing true reality, that what you experience on a day-to-day life is from your own decisions, then the mind's going to lack clarity and concentration. It's going to be muddled. Then he says they do not guard themselves. What he means by this is that mindfulness or awareness of mind is your guard. That this is kind of almost like a virus scanner that's looking over your hard drive, and then whenever a virus comes onto your hard drive, it isolates it and quarantines it, and then it cleans it up and gets it off your hard drive. So your mindfulness or your awareness of mind is like that virus scanner. Your mindfulness overlooks your mind. It's aware of your wholesome thoughts, but also your unwholesome thoughts. And when you have an unwholesome thought, the Buddha teaches you to cut that off and eliminate it and clear it out of your mind. And if you do this enough, then you won't have any unwholesome thoughts. And that's what's guarding your mind. So the Buddha is saying that these individuals aren't guarding their mind because they don't understand that it's their own mind that's producing all these unwholesome thoughts. Then he goes further and he says the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. If you were an ascetic during the lifetime of the Buddha, you were on the path to enlightenment. So what he's saying is, you're not even on the path to enlightenment if you think God's the one who's causing everything that you experience, because you're not even doing what you need to do in order to cultivate wisdom and make better decisions in your life. So this is the Buddha teaching about this being of God. This is just one location. There's many places where he teaches about this being of God. So you can see that the Buddha didn't deny the existence of God or reject God. He actually taught about this being, but he doesn't put this being in the center of his teachings. And he has other things that he says about this being God too, but he's just helping people to be able to understand this being. In terms of what people are oftentimes taught about this being, we're going to get to that here in a moment, but there's a few things that the Buddha didn't teach that kind of are applicable to this topic of God. There's obviously many teachings that the Buddha shared. His teachings are in 45 books that are about this thick. It's referred to as the Pali Canon. And he teaches in his original teachings how to get to enlightenment. And this Pali Canon doesn't have everything that the Buddha taught, but it is the largest, most complete collection that we have of his teachings. And he shares the path to enlightenment. But then there's a point in time in his teachings where he says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And he points to what's called the Four Noble Truths. He says, I taught discontentedness. I taught the cause of discontentedness. I taught the elimination of discontentedness. And I taught the way of practice that leads to the elimination of discontentedness. That's what I taught. That's what his teachings do, is they lead you to the elimination of discontentedness. And then he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he points to these 10 things. He says, I did not teach whether the world is eternal or whether it's not eternal. The world is finite or infinite. The soul is the same thing as the body, or the soul is one thing and the body is another. He actually doesn't even teach whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. He just leaves it as an undeclared teaching. And then he says, after death, the Tathagata exists. After death, the Tathagata does not exist. After death, the Tathagata both exists and does not exist. After death, the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist. The Tathagata is the Buddha. This is how he referred to himself. He didn't go around telling everybody that he's a Buddha. He referred to himself as the Tathagata. This means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth. That's what this word means. So essentially what he's saying is that once you get to enlightenment, because he was enlightened, he's not going to declare whether that individual exists after death or they do not exist, or these other options here as well. So the Buddha did teach that if you're unenlightened, you will experience rebirth and the cycle of rebirth. And this is something that you can independently verify. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You might not have the wisdom right now of independently verifying the cycle of rebirth, but this is something that you can cultivate in your journey to enlightenment. Oftentimes people are believing that they only have one life because at this current time they can't remember their previous lives. But when you start removing these pollutions out of your mind, there's the potential that you might have memories of your past lives. So the Buddha did teach that if you're unenlightened, you will experience rebirth. But if you get to enlightenment and die, he didn't teach that, because his teachings aren't about an afterlife. He's not teaching you to believe a bunch of things and then hope something good happens when you die. He's teaching you to get to a peaceful and joyful life now, in the present moment. So the Buddha didn't teach what does or what doesn't come next, but by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind's so peaceful and so joyful. If there is something next, okay, that's fine. It's either as good as what you're experiencing now or better. And if there isn't anything next, okay, that's fine too. You're already peaceful and joyful. We don't know through the teachings of the Buddha whether there is something next or not. But let's just assume that for a moment, let's just assume there is something next. If the Buddha taught that, and this was that wonderful thing, some maybe miraculous and wonderful thing that's going to come after enlightenment, in the present moment, in the unenlightened state, your mind would start longing, yearning for that. You would really want that thing, right? And now if the Buddha described that, you're basically stuck in this infinite loop that you need to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment, your longing, your yearning, but you can't ever eliminate it because you want that thing that is coming after enlightenment. So you need to be able to get to the point where you're peaceful and joyful in the present moment. What the unenlightened mind does is it always thinks the grass is greener on the other side. It's never content and happy with the current amount of money that you have. You want more money. Or you're never happy with the current car that you have. You want a bigger one. You're never happy with the current boyfriend or girlfriend that you have. You want a different one. You're never happy with the current house that you have. The mind might want a different one, right? So this is the mind longing, yearning. It's never content in the present moment. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side. So whether there is something after enlightenment or not, the Buddha never taught it. He left it as an undeclared teaching, in my opinion, very wisely, because then you can focus on what's really important, which is getting to the peace and joy now in the present moment, where your mind is not longing, yearning for something else. So these are undeclared teachings from the Buddha. And it's helpful to be able to understand these because depending on what you've learned in other places, you might have been taught certain things that are opposite of this, and you need to be able to get to the point where you understand what the Buddha did not teach. Now, in terms of the question of how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with God, I'm going to teach you that, but then I'm going to teach you how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with God too. But let me first share with you how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with God, because you can do that, but you need to be able to understand some things that maybe you've been taught in the past aren't actually true. They're misunderstandings. So as long as you are understanding these things, having a relationship with God won't hinder you from getting to enlightenment. But again, depending on what you've been taught, you might need to be able to see something beyond that. So first, if you're going to have a relationship with God and get to enlightenment, you're going to need to have right view, which you understand everything that you experience is coming from your own decisions. And maybe you can't see that right now, and that's okay. But as you journey on the path to enlightenment, you're going to need to be able to get to the point where you understand that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. It's not God that's causing the feelings that you experience, and it's not God that's causing the day-to-day things that you experience in your day-to-day life, that it's your own decisions that are leading to that. Because if you've been taught that God controls what it is that you experience, this isn't true reality. And if that was the case, why would you ever do anything to learn and grow and develop and make wiser decisions through cultivation of wisdom? So you're going to need to cultivate and develop and establish what's called right view and practice that regularly, where instead of blaming other people for the things that you experience or God or somebody else, that you look inward and you figure out what are the decisions that I made that led to this thing. Because if you can figure that out, and sometimes you need the help of a teacher to be able to see that, if you can figure that out, then all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. But if you never do that, if you just keep blaming God perhaps for what is being experienced, then you're still living in wrong view, and you wouldn't be able to have a healthy relationship with this being because you'd be blaming this being for the things that you're experiencing. And sometimes we do that in our relationships. We might blame our life partner for the things that we experience, or we might blame our kids or our parents or our brothers and sisters. So if your mind's used to doing that, you could very easily do that with this being too, and that's not something that is going to lead to a healthy relationship, is blaming others for the things that you experience. Then if you've been taught to have craving, desire, attachment to obtain things from God through prayer, you're going to need to understand that that's not the way the world works, that this being is not like a genie in a bottle where you can sit down and you can pray to this being and ask for favors or ask for things from this being. And as I share with people, don't believe other people, but I teach you don't believe me either. Right? You need to be able to see the truth for yourself. If you've been taught that God grants wishes through prayer, you need to be able to test that and see that for yourself. In fact, we can test it right now, right? I can put my hands together and communicate with God through prayer, and I can say, "Dear God, can you give me $3 million because I would like to give this money to the Thai people so that they can afford to purchase food and clothing and shelter and medical care. Please, 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 God, give me $3 million, please." It hasn't come yet, right? It's not here. So obviously, this is not true. We can test it for ourselves and see that that doesn't occur, that God is not a genie in a bottle. But oftentimes we're taught that way, that we should long and yearn and request things from God, and now we're going to miraculously experience that. But more and more, what you can see through the natural law of Gotama, that whatever you acquire in life is coming through your own decisions. That's the cause and effect, the action and result. That if you go to school and you get an education, or you go learn a trade or something like this, and you can get a job, now you can make decisions wisely to earn an income and earn money, or purchase a house or clothing or food. This is all coming from your decisions. It's not coming from God's decisions. So if you've been taught that God is a genie in a bottle, you're going to need to be able to see the truth about this, that this isn't actually true. And that might mean that you decide to change the way you pray if you choose to pray. Prayer is like communication with God. It's like having a conversation with God. And if somebody would like to do that, what I would suggest they do is have a conversation with God that they might say, "Hey, I know you exist." Or they might say, "I don't know if you exist." Or they might say, "I would like to know if you exist," or whatever you say, right? You might even say, "I don't know if you exist, but if you do exist, I would like you to know that I'm open to your guidance. And I thank you for being part of my life," right? So this might be the way you have this conversation. And if you choose to do that, what you'll notice is that this being actually is able to guide you. This being is actually able to provide you understanding about the world that you don't currently understand yourself. This being isn't going to do that at your beck and call. This being isn't going to do it every moment that you want this being to be communicating with you, but this being is able to help you and give you guidance. And this being does this based on what it knows that you need at any particular time. But it's not going to be every day, and it's not going to be exactly what you want when you want, but this being is wise enough to be able to know when it's able to help you. And now when you get that guidance, what you're going to notice is that it's thoughts inside your own mind that are deep, profound wisdom, that it's almost like grandfatherly advice, or somebody might say grandmotherly advice, or something like this. And you know it's wisdom that you don't have. You never have actually understood that particular thing before, that topic before. You might even notice some tingling on your shoulders or up the back of your neck or over your head, that this is kind of an indication from this being God of helping you to understand that this is information from this being. But when you get that information in your mind, you don't just follow it. You don't just do what this being says. You still learn. You still reflect, independently verify if it's true or false. And then if you like, you can practice that decision making. If you choose not to do what this being is recommending, it's okay. There's not going to be any punishment from this being, because this being doesn't punish you. This being still loves you, but you'll notice that you'll be able to get certain guidance from this being from time to time that's going to help you in your journey to life. So if you choose to have a relationship with this being, this is the way that you might decide to do that. And just like you might have a relationship with your neighbor, right? And it's nice to have a relationship with your neighbor, because if you would like to borrow some salt, or if you're going on vacation, you can say, hey, would you mind looking over my house for a little bit? It's nice to have a good relationship with your neighbor. But you could also choose to not have a relationship with your neighbor too, and you'd get along just fine in life. And it's the same thing here, is that you could choose to have a relationship with this being and receive this guidance in your day-to-day life, or you could choose not to do that, and you would still just get along just fine, right? So that's why you could choose to have a relationship with this being or not. But if you would like to, this is one of the things you might decide to establish, because this being isn't going to just give you unsolicited guidance. This being's not going to just show up in your life and start pushing or trying to convince you to do things a certain way. This being's only going to help you if you're open to that help. Sometimes people have been taught to have this craving, desire, attachment to be with God, potentially in heaven. They think that after this life, if you believe a bunch of things, that then you're going to exist in heaven permanently with this being. But you can look around the world and you can see that there's no such thing as permanence in terms of the material world around us. Everything is constantly changing. This is a universal truth that the Buddha teaches and that you can independently verify. You can see we started out with a certain number of people in the class, and now there's a different number. This is just impermanence. That's all that is, right? Or, today it was raining at one point, and then it stopped, and then it rained again, and then it stopped, right? This is just impermanence. That's all that is. So the world around us is constantly changing, and you can see that as a universal truth and independently verify it. But people believe that there's a permanent heaven, right? But belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. But if you look around the world through these universal truths and these natural laws that the Buddha taught, and you independently verify them, you can see that the world's impermanent. It's constantly changing. It's not possible for there to be something outside of that that is now permanent, like a heavenly realm. So if you've been taught to long and yearn for this existence with God permanently in heaven, that your mind is still craving, desiring, attached. You're not peaceful and joyful in the present moment. The mind is still longing and yearning for something, and you're not going to be able to experience the peace and joy in this life because the mind's still longing and yearning for something. So if there's any kind of craving, desire, attachment to God whatsoever, you're going to need to eliminate that. And there's certain training that the Buddha helps you to be able to accomplish this. It's called the Eightfold Path. That's the core central teaching of the Buddha that's helping you to be able to train your mind to eliminate all the longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, thinking something external is going to provide lasting satisfaction. Then you're going to need to understand the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, that what you experience is based on your own decisions. We've already been talking about that to a certain degree, but there's more depth here that I've taught earlier in this program to be able to understand the natural law of karma, and you're going to need to be able to see that true reality in your day-to-day life. You're going to need to be able to make sure you don't have fear of God. Sometimes people are taught to fear this being of God, and you don't need to fear this being. If you can think about being in a relationship with an individual that you fear, that would be very difficult to have a healthy relationship with that individual. Like if you had a roommate or a life partner or somebody, even a boss that you feared, it would be very difficult to have a healthy relationship with this being. So God is the same way. You don't need to fear this being. It's not punishing you. It's not rewarding you. It's not sending you to a good place or a bad place. It's our own decisions that are leading to any particular result. So last week, I taught how to eliminate fear. Right? This was the topic of last week. And I did that for a reason, because the book is laid out in a certain sequence that by the time you get here, you need to be able to understand that an enlightened being doesn't have any fear at all, including the fear of your own death. So you wouldn't have fear for this being of God if you're going to choose to get to enlightenment with a relationship with God. And then sometimes people ask, well, what is the purpose of this being? What is this being doing if it's not controlling me? If I'm not praying to this being in order to get things that I want, if this being isn't sending me to a good place or a bad place, then, what's the purpose? Why is this being there? Well, the way you might think about it is that this being is a practitioner of these teachings, because this being created these natural laws, so it's a deep practitioner of these teachings. And then sometimes people say, well, what if this being is all knowing and all powerful. Wouldn't it stop murders? Wouldn't it stop rapes? Like, how could it just sit back and allow these things to occur? Wouldn't it stop the wars? Well, you need to be able to understand that this being is not attached to us. This being is interested in seeing us have a harmonious life, but it's not attached to us, and it's not going to base its inner feelings on what we're experiencing. And it's not going to try to control us and force us to do one thing or the other. The best way that I can help you to understand this is to understand something that I experienced as I grew up with I helped my son to grow up. I have a 13-year-old son, but when he was a toddler and he was starting to move around, there was a period of time where he was going towards the stove, and I knew the stove was hot. And at first I pulled him back from the stove and I said, no, this is hot. Don't touch the stove. But of course he couldn't understand me because he didn't have that level of understanding yet. So then he went towards the stove again and I pulled him back. I restrained him. I was like, no, don't touch the stove. It's hot. You're going to get burned. And then he went to the stove again and I pulled him back again. And then eventually I was like, you know what? If he would like to touch the stove, I'm just going to let him touch the stove. I'm going to sit here and make sure that he's safe, but I'm just going to let him get close to it. So he went over to touch the stove. And when he got close to the stove, he could feel the heat coming off. And then he pulled his hand back and he chose not to touch the stove. So he needed to cultivate wisdom in order to be able to for him to be able to make wise decisions, right? So if God restrained us from every harmful thing that we were choosing to do, we would never cultivate the wisdom to make decisions for ourselves, and then we would be like a robot. We wouldn't have free will, and we wouldn't be interested in living in that world, because every time we went to go do something, this being would pull us back and restrain us from it. And now we would feel like we're controlled, and we wouldn't be interested in living in that world. So this is why this being doesn't stop murders and stop rapes and stop wars and stuff like that. Even though it has the power to do these kinds of things, it would have to control all these people and force them to do things his way. But this being isn't attached to us. It's not trying to control us and force us to do things its way, but instead it's interested in us cultivating wisdom so that we can see the truth for ourselves, and then we can make wise decisions that lead to wholesome results for ourselves. This being surely interested in seeing us all live in harmony, but this being understands that in order to do that, we need to have the wisdom to do that. That this being isn't going to be able to force that upon us, that we need to be able to cultivate the wisdom of having harmonious relationships in our day-to-day life. And it's not going to come from this being. So it's through the cultivation of wisdom that allows us to create harmony in our life and with the people around us, because now we can make wiser and wiser decisions. So I'm going to stop here and see if you guys have any questions on how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being. And then afterwards, we'll talk about how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with this being. So if you guys have questions here, you can use the microphones. And then for anybody online, you guys can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So let me know if you guys have any questions. You have a question, sir? It just takes a second to engage. I can help you with it if you like. I'll show you. If you just press it, the light will come on. Did the light come on? No, let's see. These are impermanent too, so sometimes the batteries go out. Okay, there you go. Now it should work.
Thank you. So you said that it's possible to attain enlightenment without being an ascetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
How is it possible for us to live a normal life, having a car, a house, a partner, and for me, for my mind, it's natural to have cravings, having this normal life. And if it is possible to attain enlightenment this way, why exactly the monks can't have a partner, or why can't they choose what to eat? and these kind of things.
Okay, sure. So the craving, desire, attachment isn't the material object itself, like the mobile phone. That's not the craving, desire, attachment. It's the way that the mind longs and yearns for it, craving for it to be permanent. So now when you lose it, when it gets stolen, when you misplace it, when it breaks, if you're craving permanence, now you'll be discontent when you realize that it's not permanent, that it breaks, gets stolen or lost or what have you. But you can learn and you can train your mind to get to the point where you understand that this phone is not permanent. And now if it gets lost, if it gets stolen, if it breaks, you're not discontent, even though you have the material object. So it's not the material objects in our life like cars, houses, money. Those aren't the attachments. It's the way the mind longs and yearns for it, craving for it to be permanent. Now, in terms of a life partner, an individual who's on their way to enlightenment, they might have actually decided to have a life partner at some point. And that's one of the ways to extinguish your craving. Like if you have a craving for a life partner, one of the ways to extinguish it is to cut it off and let it go and train your mind to not have a life partner. That's what the monks are doing. Another way is to fulfill it. That if you have a life partner, now your mind can be trained to let this go and not have a craving for permanence. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't be having sex with that life partner anymore, but you can get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having a sexual relationship, and your mind will be quite peaceful in that second stage of enlightenment, but you're still going to experience discontentedness because there's certain times where you're going to get sex and you're going to feel great about that. And there's certain times where you can't get sex and you'll be frustrated and annoyed, right? So eventually, by the time you get to the third stage of enlightenment, you will have eliminated your craving for sex. And one of the ways to do that is to also fulfill it, because eventually you get old enough where you've had enough sex. And you're like, been there, done that. Like, how many times do I need to do that? Like, I've done that multiple ways with different people, and yeah, it's fun and it's enjoyable, but you know, done it enough. It's kind of like ice cream. When we were kids, like, we thought ice cream was the best thing ever. We couldn't get enough of it. But eventually we're like, you know, ice cream's okay. You know, we can eat ice cream and be fine. But sexual craving is a bit different. Like, you can get to enlightenment and still eat chocolate ice cream and these kinds of things. But if you're having sex, there's only one goal for that, that's to get to this heightened state of pleasantness in the mind, and there's stimulation of the body in order to be able to get to that. And that's the ultimate goal. And that's what's essentially happening. Some people say, no, we're making love, you know, we're showing our affection for each other. Yeah, I understand that. That's, you know, part of what we're doing. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get to this pleasant, heightened feeling with the orgasm, right? So by the time you get to enlightenment, you could have a life partner, but you just wouldn't be having sex. And it's not about what you can or can't do. It's what the mind will have been trained to do, because you will see the truth that you might go like 6 months or a year with no sex and you feel quite peaceful and quite joyful. And then you might choose to have sex, and then you'll see that you're grumpy and irritable not too long after that. You'll be having pleasant feelings for a few hours or a few days, but then that's going to fade away because those are conditioned feelings. And then your mind's going to end up back in the irritability or the grumpiness. So as a household practitioner, you can train your mind to have certain material possessions, but you don't crave for them to be permanent. And you can have relationships, and you can train your mind to not be attached to them, meaning forming your feelings based on these relationships. The ordained practitioners, they're living in a different lifestyle. There's this household practitioner lifestyle, and there's this ordained lifestyle. There's not just one way to live life. There's these two different lifestyles. The ordained practitioners, they're eliminating all these objects in their life, like a house, a car, a job, clothing, partners and relationships. And that's one of the ways to train the mind in a very abrupt way to be able to let go of its attachment, is you distance yourself from the object that it's attached to, and now you train your mind to let it go. That is one of the options that you have, is to be ordained and do it that way, but you don't have to. It's not required to do that. What the Buddha taught them in terms of not picking their food, the reason why they're doing that is they're training their mind to not have sensual desire. That one of the things the mind has craving, desire, attachment about is food. So if you have certain flavors that you like on your tongue, now you really get excited when you have those flavors, but these other foods, you push them away. this is aversion. This is because the mind has a craving for this, but it doesn't like this. It sees this as agreeable, but it sees this as disagreeable. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you just see food as something that nourishes the body, not something to please the tongue. Of course, by the time you get to enlightenment, you will eat food and you will know it's enjoyable. Wow, that tastes very good. But then every once in a while, you're going to have food that doesn't taste good because of impermanence. But you can still eat it and you won't be grumpy, you won't be irritable, you won't be frustrated. You just understand, like, yeah, some food tastes good, some food doesn't. But the purpose of this food is to nourish the body. And now let me just eat this food because that's what I need to do in order to nourish this body. So the ordained practitioners are just walking down the street accepting food so that they don't make a choice about what it is that they eat. And now it helps them to train their mind to not have sensual desire. And a household practitioner can do the same thing. You can go into a restaurant and you can talk to the food server and you can say, hey, what do you recommend that I order here? And they'll say, oh, I recommend you order the mushroom burger. Okay, great. I'll have that. And you didn't even pick it. And maybe you don't even like mushrooms, right? Or I recommend you get the eggplant parmesan. Okay, great. Maybe you don't like, eggplants, and now you just eat it because that's what they picked. Or maybe you're at a table with 3, 4, 5, 6 different people, and everybody orders, but before they order, you already know whatever Barbara orders, I'm just going to order that same thing that she orders. I'm not going to allow this mind to be able to choose what it is that I pick to eat. And that's replicating the same things that the monks do. So you can actually train your mind to not have this favoring and opposing of food by training your mind this way.
Okay, so if I got it right, basically regarding the material things, if we have that, if we own an object, but we accept whatever happens to that object, to get broken, to lose it, to get stolen from us, is it okay? And
it's not about what's okay or not okay. It's about what you need to train the mind to be able to do, right? So you would like to get to the point where you're not craving for these things to be permanent, that you understand that it is impermanent, because that way when this phone breaks, you won't be upset about it. It's like, okay, well, the phone broke. I guess I need to get a new one. Do I have money to do that? Not so much. I'll probably get a used one. Let me go buy a new phone, right? And it'll get a used one. Or maybe I get a new phone. Maybe there's a special deal, but you won't be upset with the fact that this broke, right? So training your mind to get to enlightenment is to train your mind to no longer experience discontent feelings. And you need to be able to do that through training your mind that all these things are impermanent, so that when it does break, you don't become upset. So it's not just a matter of what's okay or not okay. It's not like rules or commandments. It's about training your mind to let go. So like at one time I left my house without my phone. This was many years ago, and I had fear. I got scared because I realized I didn't have my phone, and I was like, oh man, I'm attached to the phone. So I started leaving it at home intentionally so that I could go outside and train my mind not to have this fear. And then one time I left the phone by accident at home after I'd done this training, and there was no fear, that I was completely fine because I had trained my mind to do that. And then about a year later, the phone actually broke. And I started laughing. I was like, that's funny. Like, yeah, it's impermanent, of course. Unfortunately, my wife had another one that I could just use her phone. I didn't have to go buy one. But that's what you'll be able to experience, is that you'll see situations where your mind is getting discontent, but then you'll train it to let that go. And now in the future, when you're starting to experience these situations, you're like, in the past, I used to get really fearful when I would leave the house without the phone. But the mind doesn't do that anymore because you've trained it to let go, where before it was holding on and craving for that phone to be permanent.
So is it kind of accepting that it's impermanent? So if it happens, I knew it could happen.
It's about seeing the truth of it.
Okay.
This word accept to me is a little bit diminishing, because I've heard other people use it too, right? They say, just accept that the fact that it's impermanent. It's like, yeah, we know that it's impermanent. It's the truth that it's impermanent. And because our mind is in craving for it to be permanent, therefore we can be peaceful and joyful. So we can understand this intellectually, right? But you need to be able to train your mind to do it, right? Because I don't know if your mom's still alive, but when she dies, you might be sad,
Yes.
right? That's because you're attached to her, wanting her to be permanent, right? So you can actually get to the point where your mind has let go, that you appreciate and have gratitude for this woman that was in your life, but you're not sad at the time of her death. Because it's not your love that's causing the sadness. It's the craving for permanence. So it's one thing to sit here and talk about it and say you need to be able to see the truth that your mom is impermanent, but it's a whole nother thing to train your mind to let go so that when she does die, you can maintain your peace and maintain your joy and just have appreciation that she was part of your life.
Okay, and one last one. You also said that in this second stage of enlightenment, you still can have some discontentment. So you can only have no discontent feelings on the third or fourth level of enlightenment?
At the fourth stage is where the mind's actually enlightened. That's where the mind's fully purified of all the pollutions. That in the second stage of enlightenment, you've only eliminated 3 of the pollutions and you've thinned out number 4 and 5. That's why you're still experiencing discontentedness. But by the time you get to the third stage of enlightenment, you've eliminated 5 of the pollutions and you'll be experiencing like 3 months of peace and joy, but then you'll feel a little bit of ickiness. Or you'll go 6 months with peace and joy and you'll feel a little bit of awkwardness, like for 30 seconds or so. So it's very infrequent and very insignificant when you're in the third stage. But by the time you get to the fourth stage, you've eliminated all the pollutions in the mind and your mind's completely peaceful and joyful at that point. And you'll see that it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You don't have any anger, sadness, frustration, not even the slightest ickiness in the mind. The mind's cheerful and bright and uplifted, and you'll know that your mind's enlightened at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions here. Okay, I don't see any other. Oh, here we go. We have some questions coming in from Steve on Facebook. Let's see. Steve says, "Teacher, I've always wondered why the Buddha left undeclared what happens at death after enlightenment. It seems that this would be important. Thank you for explaining that. This would contribute to craving, desire, attachment. This makes perfect sense." You're welcome, Steve. By the way, I've participated in this lesson many times as you delivered it over the years, and it has helped me better understand and reconcile my relationship with God and my Christian faith. Oh, wonderful, Steve. That's good to know. I've always shared that the more you understand the teachings of the Buddha, the more you'll understand Jesus Christ's teachings, right? This is really helpful to be able to understand the Buddha's teachings. You understand Jesus is much better too. Okay, so let me then now just move to this next topic since there's no more questions, is that if you have no interest in having a relationship with this being of God whatsoever, you can do that and you can still get to enlightenment. Like I mentioned, it's just like a neighbor, right? It's wonderful to have a relationship with your neighbor, and I would encourage you to have that relationship. But if you don't have a relationship with your neighbor, you can still have a wonderful life too, right? So if you're not interested in having a relationship with this being of God whatsoever, you can still get to enlightenment. But there's one thing that you're going to need to keep in mind, that it's important that you have loving kindness for all beings, including this being God. If you have anger, hatred, or ill will towards this being, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment because your mind still has defilement. It still has pollution. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have any anger or hatred towards any being whatsoever, not even the slightest dislike. If right now you have certain people that you like and certain people that you dislike, that's because of your own expectations, things that you want. You're craving permanence. If people do things my way, I like them. But if they don't do things my way, I dislike them. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have that. So if somebody grew up where people were taught that God is punishing you or rewarding you, or people were taught that this being is sending you to a good place or a bad place, or that if you pray to this being, you're going to get whatever you want and you don't get it, now you could be angry and hateful towards this being. Maybe you were praying like, "Dear God, please don't let my mom die. Don't let my grandmother die. Please give me this." And then they actually die. You could be really angry at this being because you thought that this being is actually controlling what experiences you're having in the world, when in reality, it's not controlling that. And now because the mind's not getting what it wants, it experiences anger towards this being, when it's not this being who's causing your anger. It's your mind itself craving permanence. So you need to be able to get to a point where you don't have anger and hatred towards this being. If someone grew up in maybe a church or a synagogue or a temple or a mosque or something like this, and maybe they were physically abused or sexually abused, and these people that were there were supposed to be acting upon God's word or something of this nature, and you were thinking that everything you experience in life is because of God, well, now when you're experiencing that abuse, you might think it's coming from God, when in reality, that's not the case. It's coming from these people who you're around, and it's not God that did that. But now, if you think that way, that it was God, you might have anger and hatred towards this being. So you need to at least get to the point where you don't have that anger and hatred. And the Buddha teaches you methods of how to do this with loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness and cutting off and letting go anytime this anger and hatred is arising. So whether you choose to have a relation with this being or not is a choice for you to make. But you need to at least get to the point where if you're not going to have a relation with this being, that you don't have anger and hatred towards this being. Because if you try to keep this anger kind of bottled up in the corner of your mind, and you think you're only going to be angry towards this being and this one person or this one individual, this one being, it's not going to work that way. That's going to bubble up and it's going to come out towards other beings too. So your mind's not free. It's not liberated if you still have anger and hatred towards this being. So these are the things that you'll need to learn and understand in order to be able to either get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. And it's your choice to make because it's your life, it's your journey, it's your path to enlightenment. Teachers are like tour guides, just pointing out for you the things that you need to learn and understand in order to be able to experience that enlightened mental state. So I'm just going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions on this part of the talk about how to get to enlightenment without a relationship with God. So let me know if you guys have any questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. All right. So what I'll do then is I'm just going to end by thanking all of you guys. Thank you for coming to class. Thank you for your interest to learn and grow and develop. Next week, we're going to be in chapter 19, which is titled The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. This is where you're going to learn about the life story of the Buddha and these impactful observations that he had of sickness, aging, and death that led to his journey to enlightenment. Because oftentimes it's sickness, aging, and death that an individual struggles the most with. Either your own sickness, aging, and death, or the people around you that you're close to. You might really struggle during those periods of time. But the Buddha figured out why your mind struggles and how to actually fix that. So we're going to talk about the life story of the Buddha and these motivating factors that he decided to then go get to enlightenment based on sickness, aging, death, and this other observation as well. So whatever you guys choose to do today, have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Again, thank you for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.